Awesome. Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for another conversation during my birthday equity walk. I'm really excited to continue the conversation, to continue the journey, and talk to somebody that I find deeply inspiring and somebody that I feel whenever I engage, my creativity just starts to spark and flow. And so just to remind everyone, the Birthday Equity Walk started last year as I wanted to talk about the work of Food Recovery Network and also how we've evolved over time and how I myself have evolved over time with this concept called equity. And with Food Recovery Network, the journey last year began with my desire to talk and give more space about what it means to have access to healthcare, very different than health insurance. And so that's where the whole conversation came from. And then this year, wanted to give more space around a broader sense of what equity means. And so today, I'm joined by a friend of mine that I mentioned, the creativity and arts. When I have talked about, my equity journey and contribution, when I've talked about DC Emancipation Day, or the emancipation within the United States, I often talk about how important the arts are to me, and give lots of examples of that. And so when I think about equity and access, and I think about contribution and whose contributions are talked about, I think that really does intersect with equity. So today I'm so excited to introduce everyone to my friend, Dr. Ceylon Mitchell. And we met during a couple of years ago through Food Recovery Network in the University of Maryland at College Park. But I'll turn things over to you, Ceylon. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me today, Regina. It's an honor and a pleasure to be able to share space with you.
Thanks. I'm so excited. I know we have a lot of well, I have a lot of awesome questions. As I always say to my friends, I get to have really awesome conversations with you. You've gone through a lot of transformations, since you and I first met several years ago, that I really think will be so important for everyone to hear. And I hope also, again, to continue with that wellspring of creativity and just sparking ideas and making connection. I'm really so thankful to be able to talk with you. And so, maybe do you want to give us a little bit of your brief history of, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're up to, and we can go from there.
Absolutely. So I would consider myself sort of a multi-hyphenate artist. I'm involved I'm creative in a number of ways. First and foremost, I'm an individual artist, specifically a musician. And even specifically, I am a flutist. I have my doctorate, hence doctor. I have my doctorate now in musical arts from the University of Maryland in flute performance. And my focus, in a nutshell, was really looking at the diverse and rich flute traditions from the Latin American countries of Cuba and Brazil. My bread and butter is classical, so I looked at both their classical traditions, their unique Latin American classical traditions, but also their own folk and popular traditions as well, which has just been really enjoyable for me to be able to broaden, when you talk about equity, sort of broaden what arts equity is within my particular arts ecosystem, and being able to really look at classical music beyond just sort of a Western European paradigm. So that's a huge part of my identity. I'm also an entrepreneur, so I have a business not just as a musician, but then also as a multimedia professional. So I produce content, so as a photographer, as a videographer, graphic designer, and I also serve as a arts marketing and marketing in general consultant for individuals, arts organizations, and beyond. And the name of my organization is M3, which stands for Mitchell Media and Marketing. All right, so I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska, born in '89, and born to military parents in the Air Force, and we were in Rome, New York for a little bit, and then spent from 3 years old all the way through high school. I lived in Anchorage, Alaska. It is, whenever I tell people that, they're like, "Oh my gosh, what was that like?" And it's funny for me. It was what was quote unquote normal. So coming,
Right.
so coming to the East Coast, I mean, I would come every summer visiting my mom and my dad's aunts and uncles, or their brothers and sisters, my aunts and uncles, every summer. So when it was time for me to move and come to East Coast for college, none of it really seemed too different. Obviously, there's the seasons and there's the weather
Mhm.
and all that, So there's obviously some culture change, but overall, I just kind of found my unique experience to not be too much out of the ordinary, until I got older and all that. But yeah, I came to the East Coast, did my schooling. I was a busy athlete as well as musician. So I did track and field, um, both for D3 and Division 1 level. Long story short, did that for a year. That was great. Finished my degrees, came to the University of Maryland for my master's, finished that up in 2016, worked in the DC area, got to meet awesome people like you, and then went back to school in 2019, right before the pandemic changed everyone's lives, and then slogged through that in pandemic university, and then finished in just this past May 2022. And so now, just going back to where I started, I'm an artist, I'm an entrepreneur. I am a now husband and dad of two littles. We moved up to Baltimore right around this time last year. So we're coming up on our 1 year anniversary, being first time home buyers and all that fun adulting journey. So now, yeah, I'm just really, I'm in such a fun position right now to really be in the midst of sort of carving a very unique path, and being able to, whenever possible, share my journey with my fellow artists, my fellow arts organizations, entrepreneurs, and just really just show and learn what I gain. I'm really all about making the journey for folks after me just a little bit easier, so they can avoid any of the pitfalls that I have made have gone through. So I like to just kind of make that path just a little bit more smooth. But yeah, so right now, just being involved as a creative individual. And it's funny, I'm sorry if I'm jumping to one of your questions, but when you mentioned healthcare equity, being a parent now, and becoming a parent during the pandemic has just really opened my eyes, just to say in general, to sort of the rat race and the disparities that exists, and knowing that not everyone has the sort of amount of resources and privilege that allows them to necessarily care for their children, or even care for others. Just being a caregiver, you realize that you may not always have access to what you want to allow your family members, or those who you care about, to be set up in such a way. So sometimes you do the best with what you got, until you can get more resources or access, however that comes to be. And like with many things, being creative and being resourceful and being innovative are sort of universal themes that you sort of that you rely upon. And for someone like me, who's had to use those traits as someone on stage and someone presenting some sort of storytelling as a creative, you see that you end up dipping into that well in your regular personal life, for others. And I think that's something, as far as purpose, that I've really enjoyed doing, and enjoying learning more about, using what I have and using the gifts and talents that I have to be able to be of service truly, to others. But I'll stop there, and that's just me in a nutshell. I'm service oriented. I try to be values driven, and I just enjoy having, again, this multi-hyphenate career.
Right. Oh, you just provided us so much depth and richness in just us understanding a bit more of who you are. I know I just learned some new things about you, and I really wanted to just, pause to give space and gratitude to that understanding of, the creativity that is that comes with trying to make the best decisions with sometimes not a lot, and sometimes people don't have a lot because of structural reasons. And sometimes that creativity can feel like it comes with a cost. I grew up, I've said this before, I grew up, not very well off financially, and that's where, you have to be very creative to sort of, when you're growing up, it's really important sometimes for some of us to like fit in and not be an outlier. And you really have to think creatively and act and be creative, to ensure that you don't stand out for like the wrong reasons. And of course, as we get older, some of those things like fall by the wayside, luckily. But I was just thinking about the creativity and the storytelling and putting yourself into the shoes or the mindset or the time of others. And I'm thinking about when one of the things that I learned just now is the specifics of what you were studying with the Latin American and Cuban traditional music. And I mean, talk about going back into the past, but also I think music, and you're the doctor, so you please tell me, but the wonderful blends of that music and understanding the histories of those, locations, and how does that show up, in terms of like how you think about music now? What do you see in your new, physical location now that you've got your doctorate, but like you're in Baltimore, this, very mixed city, there was a lot, but like tell me what you're thinking.
You know, I go back first and foremost to I think it was either, maybe it went far back to my early beginnings as a musician back in sixth grade when I had to choose a band instrument after 2 years of recorder, and I just heard the flute in a music shop, and I just basically the instrument chose me. I don't know if it goes this far back, but at least by the time I was in high school, and I knew that I wanted to have a career in music, however that shaped up. I think one of the inspiring things for me about music was just the ability to be able to at least have a lens and a window into a culture, into a time and space, right? Like to just have and build that empathy for whatever community that might be. I found that in back in high school and still today, I find that fascinating. When we can't always hop on a plane and go there, or we can't hop in a time machine and go there, to see a glimpse into whatever century and whatever place that life must have been like, or the function of music at that time, right? And then to study how that particular function at that time changed or has changed and has evolved to today. Because one aspect that I've learned, especially from my musicology professors, is the very problematic and finicky word of authentic,
Mm,
because something can be authentic, again, in a specific time, in a specific place, but through globalization, and just through the dissemination of ideas, and how cultures change, right? Like, it's just like when we try to say, well, is this authentic insert genre of music, right? It gets very difficult to define that. And there's always a very important place for preservation and preserving whatever traditions that or culture that might be for someone. But it's not okay if it's at the risk of sort of halting where things are just progressing as new generations have new ideas and they interact with others and they create something new, through hybridization and all these different concepts. There's nothing wrong, and you don't want to sort of stop that. You want to be able to say, okay, well, I appreciated this at that time, but I'm also going to embrace change, because that is how we move forward, right? So those are some aspects that that really stick with me now. And as I've spoken with some of my fellow Latinx musicians and colleagues and arts professionals, something that I really value is just being in solidarity. And you know, utilizing whatever platform I have, whatever moment I can present. I know that I'm not the authentic voice, but I'm simply someone who's there to celebrate the art form in with whatever knowledge, with whatever contributions that I can give, and giving them a a platform. I constantly collaborate with, if I want to present or explore a certain art form or a certain community or certain culture, they're on stage with me. They're involved in the presentation, right? They're involved in the program, right? Because I'm never even trying to get anywhere close to appropriation. For
Mhm.
me, I celebrate what they want to do. I the bug bit me for whatever reason or reasons, and so and as me as a musician, artist, to get on stage and present, that is something that I love to take with me, and those who I love to take with me as well. And as I over my shortest life, only 33, there's still a lot
Mhm.
more life to be led,
Yes.
but already in 33 years, in the few cities and places that I've lived in, it's I always find it super empowering and fun to find these specific communities that live in these cities, these pockets, whatever, and see how I can just be in community. I think one of the guest artists who I met during my grad school, who's Brazilian, and she's a flutist, and she told me that when it comes to really solid community engagement and being able to work with people from different communities and cultures, is the first step is to show up and be a guest, right? Like I think back to when the Brazilian music bug bit me, or the Brazilian culture bit me in 2015. um, I literally was asked to perform in a musical about a Brazilian icon. Didn't know anything about the music, but someone sent me an invite. I showed up, and I showed up, I shut up, I listened, I absorbed, I contributed. I took feedback, and I contributed again. I was on that feedback loop, and still am today. Um, and again, I just find it being an honor when you can gain from others, and when you can have a lens into how they see the world, and how specifically art and music function for them. um, there's just nothing like it. Again, so it takes me back to that high school initial inspiration of what music does for me, as someone who is just for that moment sort of transporting myself to that group, and transporting myself to um, just how they see the world, right? So, and it's a constant journey, because we're always taking in information, we're always learning more. So those are, again, some of the lessons that I've learned, and very much in progress. I meet people from different communities. We collaborate. I learn something new. It's a give and take, and I find those to be the most sort of fascinating communal aspects. And obviously, that can translate, beyond the arts, to just so many things, and just interpersonal relationships, right? Like, truly, even if it's just two people, for that moment, you all are creating a community right in that moment. And how are you giving care to that community, right? It's just like, whether little community, big community, right? Like, I think it's always like, how can we really make sure that this finite time that we have, like, how can we make sure that we're really being genuine, being present, and making people really feel that you see them, and that you hear them. So, just a lot of big picture. There's a lot of both hard and soft skills and all that stuff, but it's just been a joy. And a lot of what I've been hearing a lot of musicians talk about and artists talk about is, we in anyone who is creative, because we all can be creative. When you're being creative in that moment, it's a gift, right? Like, we should never take for granted. When we have an opportunity to tap into that aspect of our humanity, especially with others, it's something that is just truly something that we should be grateful for, and that we should nurture it, and that we should feel like that we deserve it, and that others deserve it as well. So.
Beautiful. So beautiful. And I mean, I'm just so excited for everybody to, like, hear these words, because I think you really touched on so many pieces just around what does it mean to, because I talk to people all the time about, the communities that I feel that I am part of. Like there's no question I'm in that community interacts with me and vice versa. And then there are other communities that I am adjacent to, and that is what you were talking about, the showing up and just being quiet for a little bit, because this is not, and then slowly over time. And so I think what I would add to that beautifulness of being gentle, nurturing, is also this patience
Mm,
that I really heard that throughout, that it doesn't happen right away. And that sometimes in these different communities we have like this sense of, not everybody, but there can be sometimes this sense of privilege that I get to be part of this because I want to be part of this. And yes, eventually, but what does it mean to show up and to show up in a way that everyone can absorb? And I think that does take a lot of patience. And I think when you're talking about the other ingredients, caring and nurturing, that's where things really can open up into these beautiful um spheres of life.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think something that I read in one of my um, music method books many years ago was actually there's a quote in there that says, "It's all a question of time, patience, and intelligent work." And
Mhm.
this was applying to just learning an instrument, right? Like a particular craft, a pedagogy, as it were. But you know, as I grow and evolve, like I just see that just as you're saying that translates to any and everything, right? You put in the time, you sit there, maturate, let it be nurtured, just like a garden, and then you have to bring expertise sometimes into these particular things. Again, certain skills, whether it be hard or soft skills, you have to then put the study, and if it's going to be something like that, um and that is all about your own particular journey, whatever study, whatever expectations mean to you, right? Whether it's coming together in a drumming circle, or it's coming together on a concert stage, or it's just playing the guitar with your grandma, whatever it is, like time, patience, and intelligent work. You all define what that is, but yeah.
I love that. And um another piece, one more question I have around this topic before I move on to another, you are multi-hyphenate, that is for sure. I was saying, for everyone listening in, when Salon and I were prepping for this, I was like, oh, I could talk to you for like ever, and hey, if we do it right, we'll be friends for a very long time to come. Um, but when we were thinking about, this music, and the Brazilian music and being, part of that community, and again, what you studied, when you were earning your doctorate, it reminds me of this question I have for you around amalgamation and authenticity and the beauty of music. And when everyone is contributing, it starts to look and sound different. And who are the folks that hold that tradition as things begin to blend and change and combine in all these beautiful, wonderful ways. I was recently in New Orleans and went to a jazz history museum. And oh my goodness, right? Day one, as soon as there was this place called New Orleans, there was music from literally all over the world. And it immediately began to blend and become something that had not been seen before because of the different contributions from everyone, saying, in peace and with love, here's music that we can jam together with and create something. And so I don't know, that just sort of like came to my mind as you were talking about the power and beauty of music in all its many forms.
Absolutely. Was it Preservation Hall jazz
It
that you went
was
to?
um you know what? I don't remember the name of it because it was a Al is the curator,
Okay.
and it was basically like not his house, but it was like this tiny house in the neighborhood of Treme.
Hmm.
And he just leads his own curated walk through New Orleans music by, playing CD players that talk
Hmm.
about when people first arrived, and it was really fascinating. It was awesome.
No, that's cool. Because I only the first time I went there was just a few years ago, which is like, man, like when I went there for the first time, I wish I had been there like for like my 10th time. But
Yeah.
in my research, it's cool to learn that some people consider New Orleans to be one of the uh, uh, not so much a Southern American place, but a more Northern Caribbean place, just because, again, of just some of the history behind it. I mean, specifically the Latin tinge coming from Cuba and Florida and even Mexico. It's like you're saying, just the amount of mixing going on, both musically, both between peoples. It's great.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. And so, then moving on to one of your other hyphenates, you touched upon this when you were giving your introduction of, some of the things that make up who you are. When we think about photography, so tell us about, okay, so you studied in the flute, and you teach the flute. You are an instructor, professor in that regard. So talk to us about this other hyphen. And I think that hyphen maybe blends into the other hyphen of being an entrepreneur. So maybe we can dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always considered myself to have both a left brain and right brain over the years, and if my AP Physics teacher had it his way, I would have went into engineering. Long story short, so I've always had the technical aspect of things.
Mm.
And um, while I was in undergrad doing my music career, this whole thing called social media was bubbling up and all that, and it fascinated me not just for the posts that you could do, but really sort of thinking about, again, the nuts and bolts behind it. So thinking about sort of visual storytelling, right? I think is the theme. For me, that mixed with oral storytelling, I've always wanted to see how I could create visual imagery, and whether it was for a lack of time or just not thinking that I had the expertise, I never really dove too much into sort of visual arts until later, when as I was going through communications and media work during school, or after school actually, but at the University of Maryland where I got my grad school. And I basically stumbled upon a community engagement job that had a position for communications and media, and it sounded cool. It sounds like something that I wanted to explore more. Little did I know that I really wanted to really dive into that head on. It gave me an opportunity to think about messaging and thinking about visual storytelling for an organization, and thinking about visual assets, and thinking about visual brand identity, and thinking about intentionally crafting um, a, um, a, a brand, and how you can then use that to leverage whatever service or product that you're trying to bring about. So I ended up taking these Saturday classes, tuition remission classes, through this program for multimedia journalism, and it taught me photography, it taught me videography, it taught me blogging, it taught me mobile journalism, capturing content and thinking about distributing it, thinking about crafting packages, right? So it's really specifically in the news lane. That unlocked more inspiration for me and just joy and passion. And so when I realized that I finally, after these years of sort of looking at photography on the side, and being like, oh, that's for professionals, I'll never be able to do that, but to finally be able to like have a camera in my hand and to be able to like learn both the hard and the soft skills, both the technical aspect, but also the artistic aspects about it. I think that was something that just tapped into the common theme of my professional life, of being able to see, again, both the technology and the art behind things, and then how you can put that together. I basically, for my final project for my media entrepreneurship course, it was creating a fake company. Long story short, the company that I created for my final project ended up being my current actual LLC. And it was the mission stays the same. It's all about me being a part of the community, specifically being an artist, being a part of the artist community, seeing a voids that can be filled, thinking about how creating assets and then marketing those assets, telling a story, are skills that not just for individual artists, not just for arts organizations, but really for, I think, folks in general, especially before social media. I think both during and after social media, people still don't always really know, and strategically, intentionally sometimes, what they want to do and what they want to say. So thinking about how I could bring that forward in strategic and business-minded ways for artists and arts organizations, as something that has always been something that's really near and dear to me. And so that's something that I did then, and to now. It's been a great journey and a great blossoming journey of being able to have this business that serves these specific clients, and that you know, it's a gift that keeps on giving, because you know, there's always more and more artists, there's always more and more musicians, and so whether they're my direct peers of folks who I even went to school with on the musician side, or the folks who I've worked with as an arts marketer, and now I'm working as a consultant, or I'm seeing a new crop, a new generation of high schoolers and younger who want to do this whole arts or music thing. For me, it's all about sharing the knowledge, and again, about making sure that you know, sure, you know, my bottom line, sure, that's there, and that has to be taken care of. But really, more importantly for me is, you know, how am I making sure that the knowledge is being shared, so that, you know, anyone who wants to go into a particular field, specifically into music or into the arts, they want to be an artist. I want to make sure that I do whatever I can to make sure that they are self-sustained, right? And that it's something that will allow them to both be fulfilled, but then also pay the bills, right? So that's something
Right.
that I think is just really important, because the reality is sometimes through traditional structures, you know, you talk about these systems, sometimes they're not always built to serve new generations or folks from historically marginalized communities. So again, for me, thinking from a social justice lens, like, how can I use my platform, my knowledge, share it, make sure that that we widen the playing field.
Mm.
So
I love that. And you know, there's 1,000 different ways that you know, what you just provided to us. We could go with that, but you know, I'm just thinking about, you know, really that nurturing that you talked about, and making things easier for the new generation coming through, because you're absolutely right. I agree with you. And I think, you know, this whole conversation around what work, at least in America, looks like. And now younger people are the ones who are starting families, are, you know, starting their own job, their own businesses, because they might not want to work for the whatever the established, you know, places to work are. It doesn't fit for them any longer. And you know, really, because your generation, Salon, is so large, and coming into a place of being in charge, you know, really being able to have that say as to, you know, what this could look like for all of us, that I am so thankful that so many people, especially, you know, doing the work that I do with Food Recovery Network, interacting with young people, and that nature, that nurture, and that care, and that widening, and that recognition of a structure that has not been easy, and intentionally marginalizes, you know, that no longer fits who we, the ethos, the values of who we want to be on our journey, to use that word again that you'd mentioned.
yeah, absolutely. And I know there's been research about this. I know it was bubbling a lot during the sort of heart of the pandemic in like 2021 and stuff, but sort of this idea of my millennial generation, that we're going to patronize organizations that are values driven, right? Not just, you know, the fact that they've been around for a long time, or the name recognition, or have big budgets and all that, but truly it's like, where do your actions back up your values, right? Like that's where we're going to put our dollars when it comes to philanthropy and helping to sort of keep these organizations sustained, right? You know, uh, it's more about sort of the crowdfunding, sort of getting a broadened audience rather than the more traditional model of just relying on just a few big checks from a few individuals.
Mm.
What's more sustainable is actually thinking about, when we kind of think about sometimes the radio stations, they get a little bit, but from a lot. Or you think about those sort of
Mhm.
models. That's really what the future is more about. And if you're actually, values driven, and it's clear to see from your actions in the initiatives that you bring, then the track record speaks for itself. Versus sort of hiding behind the veil and lack of transparency and sort of was the room where it happens, as they say in Hamilton, right? But really, my generation is about tearing down those veils and like, let us have the transparency, let us have the pay transparency, let us see the pay equity, like all of that transparency is just a big theme, really through this sort of changing of the way of work. So
I love it. And, I wanted to transition us to the um, one of the last questions that I have for you. Um, that again, you touched on, but wanted to draw it out a bit more around the multi-hyphenate, being the entrepreneur, having lived on this earth for 33 years, you know a lot of people. And and I feel like sometimes creating your own business is this leap of faith in yourself, that you're gonna be okay, and that the community will be there for you, and however you define community. And you and I had talked about how you're seeing that play out for you, in terms of you might have known somebody from this once part of your life, but because you are able to be who you are, because you are able to show up in these many different ways, that person has now been able to enter into these different areas of your life. And I would think the same goes for those folks too. And like, how that is helping you to I think live this full life, but then also have within that have this business that you are nurturing and you're fostering.
yeah, I mean, it's great. It's a blast when I can, however I can, really, it's just, again, however I can be of service to someone, right? I'm like, I have XYZ skills, I have XYZ skill sets and all that. And, you know, for them as the consumer, right? Because the power of the consumer in these last sort of 50 years, the shift now, is the beauty of it is that they can say, I want that. I don't think I want that. And so when I'm in the picture, and that might apply to them, oh, I'm 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 all set here, but oh, I could use help with my website, or I'm all set there, but yeah, I do actually need someone to provide music for XYZ. So like that's just really cool for me because, you know, on one aspect, to just be honest, like you always have to make sure it's quality, not quantity, and you can't stretch yourself too thin. But for me, it sounds cliche, but it's so true. Like when you truly love what you do, when you love these different skill sets, and you find that it doesn't so much feel like work. It doesn't feel like a
Mm.
drag. It doesn't feel like an obligation. Um, and it provides versatility, right? Sometimes different markets fluctuate with demand, right? Whether it's the time of the year or just any given year, right? You know, we saw and we're seeing, within the performing arts, people are picking and choosing where they're going to go see a show, or where,
Mhm.
whether it's a movie or it's going to an actual performance on stage live. People are, and sure, the recession and inflation, all that, people are just really being very choosy with what they do. So sometimes for some folks, depending on their position in the performing arts, sometimes some things are a bit lower, right? At the same time, though, when we look at technology and how we engage, if I was a shareholder in Zoom, right before the pandemic, like I would,
Yeah.
things would be great because of just the skyrocket. So I find that typically when I'm working with folks directly in the arts, whether it's me being an artist or it's me being a creative, they're more than likely one of the skill sets that I have is likely going to resonate with them, or say, well, you know what, I'm actually okay, but you know what, there's someone who I think would benefit from that. And oftentimes that word of mouth marketing and advertising is just so powerful on its own because I am a part of the community. I am a part of the same target audience, right? So I feel like that I'm able to speak the language. I'm able to be aware of the pain points for a potential consumer. I'm able to think through a budding artist and what the stages of their development would look like. I'm able to think as an educator and think through how do I want to serve my students. I'm able to think as a parent now and think about, okay, what sort of development, as my children are growing and hitting these milestones, how can creativity and the arts and all of that be a part of it from early childhood and above? As parents, they love photos. All right. So it's just sort of like, there's just a lot of sort of different journeys and different scenarios that I'm really fortunate to have, my relatively few skill sets, but there's a lot of different rabbit holes that we can go down and how they can be used. Again, it's all about the function of the art, right? Like we always come back to that, whether it's dancing in the street or it's going corporate headshots or it's thinking about a something that is going to benefit your child's college path or whatever, or how we all can have STEAM versus STEM, how we can have both the science, and the technology, but also the arts and the creativity and the cultures, and how that makes us truly much more well-rounded. And yeah, so really, however I can think about empowering people to be entrepreneurial, or however I can just use my products and services to just be of help for whatever given aspect of someone's life in that time, and know that things are going to change. But for me, it's all about relationships, right? If I can know that, yes, we had that one particular transaction, but during that transaction, we formed this community, and if I'm doing my job right and living out my values, there's going to be a community that has been formed in a relationship that's going to go beyond that transaction, right? And we're going to find ways to better each other's lives, to be able to help each other going forward. Because again, it's like with this finite amount of time, it's like, why not make it more enjoyable and more communal while we can? I don't know if I'm gonna go down the rabbit hole, but you and I had that conversation about thinking about having this aspect of collectivism in community, and that for many cultures, but just specifically for African American culture and the African diaspora, this aspect of coming together, giving back, this idea of Sankofa, of being able to use what you have and pulling others forward with you, right? Like that's just great, and it's just fulfilling, right? Like I just think it's something that is. And then when you think about how, again, from equity, when a lot of structures don't care about that, it's just about me, let me get mine, and that's all that matters. Best of luck with you. But again, for my values of having that aspect of being able to help others and help them find and carve their own path, that's something that's always important to me. Educator, I want to make sure that students do what they want to do, whether they go into my own classical path or not. Like, hey, just be inspired and do what you want to do, and that's just is across any of my identities.
I love that so much. And yeah, I feel like I feel like I need to get together a group of us to talk about that, because the collectivism, because again, to use your word, the journey of it all, and how we all end up in our destiny, to maybe use that word, where for me growing up, this idea of collectivism and bringing people up with you wasn't necessarily something that was taught at the parental stage.
Mm.
And growing up where I grew up, there just were really also, and not, this isn't an idea that is solely within the African American
Sure,
community, of course.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
But like for me, just growing up in a space that I was one of my family, and that was it. Like pretty much, just coming to that in a different sort of way, but sort of getting in my right seat and just being like, oh, this is what it's supposed to feel like,
Mm,
and revving up from there has just been so fascinating. This, always having had this discomfort with this idea of what capitalism asks of all of us, and what some of the myths to perpetuate capitalism has asked of all of us. Knowing that, yeah, it is a bigger structure, but that there are others who are like, yeah, I feel that discomfort too, and then feeling that there is this stream that I can dip into, of people before me, our ancestors, us in the present, and now your little ones that are going to feel, the gifts of this collectivism that we are keeping alive and nurturing.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no, there's nothing like it because um yeah, I mean, just because like you said, capitalism and these structures sell these myths, sell these dreams, that only hurt all of us, right? I'll say they hurt the majority of us at the bottom, right, who aren't at the very tip top. And so we get on these hamster wheels and get busy, and then but we're busy chasing you know things and all that. But then I think it's easy to forget or lose sight of like purpose. I my my dad sent me this video recently, that I had seen in the past, but it was of the graduation speech that Chadwick Boseman gave at Howard University, and the biggest theme for him was all about your purpose, right?
Mm,
And it's just something that I completely agree with, right? Like, while you have this time, and whatever your beliefs are, if you believe that you die and that's it, or you believe that you die and there's something after, like, to still make use of your time here on Earth with some sort of purpose and some sort of making it better. As they say, not just in sustainability circles, but just in general, like leaving something better than the way you found it, right?
right.
I think that is something that is and it's just truly beneficial. And if you have a communal mindset and you're not just all about yourself, then I think that's something that you're gonna kind of naturally fall into.
Right. Oh, goodness. Well, okay. My last two questions, I'm gonna say them both at the same time, because they are short, but they're very important to this conversation. And that is, the first is, can you tell us what your website is again? And I'll make sure that, everyone has access to that, so we can just hear it from you, because you spent a lot of time creating this business. So what your website is, and then are you accepting new inquiries at this time?
I love those last two questions. Yeah. So if you don't mind, I'll share two websites.
Please,
So
yes.
so my first name, last name, salonmitchell.com. That's where folks can find me. And they can learn all about my artist identity self, artist educator, all that great things. And if you search enough, it'll take you to the other website if you're specifically looking to know more about me, as a multimedia producer and a marketing consultant. That website is the number 3, mitchellmedia.com. So m3mitchellmedia.com, or Ceylon Mitchell, first name, last name.com. And yes, I am accepting clients across the board. I always do my best to make room in the calendar, whether someone's looking. I laugh because I thought about weddings, and
Yeah.
whether they're looking for a wedding musician, or they're looking for a wedding photographer, or if they're looking for lessons, or they're looking for workshops. So the contact forms on my websites make it really fun and easy for you to simply select what way you want to interact with me, and see how we can potentially collaborate. So would
Awesome.
love to hear from anyone here listening and watching this talk.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for everyone listening in, again, I'll make sure that you have access to both of those websites. And I highly recommend, if you are there, I mean, we heard it. There's so many different ways to interact with Salon, and I think, elevate, make better, these ideas that we have swirling around. Maybe what the big day, the big wedding day is going to look like, events that we're having, website support. There's so much that this multi-hyphenated, amazing human being can do. So I definitely recommend. And, for me, Salon comes highly recommended. So if you want to talk before you get in touch, you know where, everyone knows where to find me. Salon, thank you so much for your time. This has been incredible. I really do hope that, we can have some subsequent conversations because I think there was so much that we could have continued to talk on. I know you're busy, you know, one of the biggest roles of all, being a dad and a partner, that's a husband. It's a big deal. So I don't want to steal too much of your time, but I really think that there's so many cool things to continue to just, unlock and put out there and just, nurture. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Regina. I love just talking through these ideas with, someone like-minded and values-driven too. So just thank you for this opportunity.
Awesome. Well, everyone listening in, I'm going to have many more conversations. Please let everybody know about this conversation and the other ones that you see. This is my birthday equity walk. This year, well, Capricorn season, to be specific, my birthday to mid-January, I'm trying to encourage people to become recurring monthly donors to Food Recovery Network to help support our equity walk. And so that means, for those of you who have, the space in your budgets to consider FRN for $10 a month recurring, $15 a month, $5 a month. Truly, when we collect, our abilities together, it really can mean so much for Food Recovery Network. There really isn't an amount that's too small. If you have space in your budget, so please do consider becoming a monthly donor. I would greatly appreciate it. Again, thanks everyone for listening in. Salon, thank you for your time. I am so excited to continue this birthday equity walk in this Capricorn season. And everyone, I hope that you all have a great day. Be safe and peace and love to you all. Thank you all.